I was 26 when I needed emergency spinal surgery, just 3 months into my surgical residency. The pain had been unbearable for weeks. When my parents told me they couldn't be there because Vanessa's college graduation was more important, something broke inside me. I spent 5 days in the hospital alone, except for my boyfriend Daniel. That was 9 years ago. This morning, I adjusted my chief of surgery badge and walked into new staff orientation. There, sitting in the front row with a nervous smile, was my sister Vanessa, completely unaware her new boss was me. Before I dive into this story that changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of people healing from family wounds. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I was always the quiet, studious sister, while Vanessa was the outgoing star. Our dynamic was established early. I was 6 when Vanessa was born, and from that moment, the spotlight in our family shifted permanently. By the time I was 10, I had already internalized that my achievements would always take a backseat to my sister's activities. That year, I won first place in the regional science fair with my project on heart valve functions. My parents had promised to attend, but at the last minute, Vanessa's dance recital was rescheduled for the same afternoon. "We'll try to make it after her performance," my mother Catherine had said, but they never showed. I accepted my certificate alone, scanning the audience for faces that weren't there. The pattern continued throughout my teenage years. When I was inducted into the National Honor Society during my junior year of high school, my parents skipped the ceremony to help Vanessa prepare for her freshman prom. "It's just a certificate, Rebecca," my father Martin had said. "Your sister only gets one first prom." On my 16th birthday, they forgot entirely because it fell during Vanessa's soccer tournament weekend in Seattle. I blew out candles on a cupcake that Daniel's mother had thoughtfully brought over. My fascination with medicine began at age 10 when I broke my arm falling from a tree in our backyard. The orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Miller, had explained the healing process to me with such care and respect that I felt immediately drawn to the profession. By 12, I had amassed a collection of medical textbooks that I'd saved up for with my allowance money. In high school, I volunteered at Providence Portland Medical Center, starting in the gift shop and eventually shadowing nurses on the pediatric floor. Despite my perfect grades and clear passion, my parents rarely acknowledged my medical aspirations. "Doctors work too hard and have no life," my father would dismiss whenever I mentioned medical school. Meanwhile, every one of Vanessa's interests was treated as a potential career breakthrough, from her brief stint in debate club to her summer trying photography. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became my mother's frequent refrain whenever I preferred studying to social events. Vanessa knows how to balance fun and responsibility. What my mother failed to recognize was that I was balancing 2 jobs and volunteer work while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, leaving little time for the parties Vanessa frequented. The most frustrating part was that Vanessa seemed completely unaware of the imbalance. She would bounce into my room, chattering about how mom and dad had promised to fund her spring break trip in the same week they had told me they couldn't help with my college application fees. When I earned a full scholarship to Oregon State University for pre-med, my parents' reaction was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, honey," my mother had said, before immediately turning the conversation to Vanessa's upcoming volleyball tournament. At dinner that night, my scholarship warranted approximately 2 minutes of discussion before the topic returned to Vanessa's social life for the remainder of the meal. College became my escape. I worked part-time at the campus medical center and waited tables on weekends to cover expenses not included in my scholarship. Despite my grueling schedule, I maintained straight A's, determined to secure my place in medical school. It was in organic chemistry class that I met Daniel. Tall with kind brown eyes, he sat next to me on the first day and asked to be lab partners. Unlike my family, Daniel noticed my hard work and intelligence immediately. "You're going to be an amazing doctor someday," he told me after watching me tutor struggling classmates. His unwavering belief in my abilities was foreign and intoxicating. For the first time, I experienced what real support felt like. Daniel was pursuing a degree in medical technology, and our career paths complemented each other perfectly. By our junior year, we were inseparable, spending late nights studying in the library and early mornings grabbing coffee before classes. The pattern with my family continued through college. My parents visited campus exactly 3 times in 4 years, and each visit coincidentally aligned with Vanessa's cheerleading competitions in the area. Holidays at home meant sitting through dinners where Vanessa's social exploits dominated conversation. My achievements, making Dean's List, securing competitive research positions, being accepted to prestigious summer programs, were mentioned briefly before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Vanessa. It was during my senior year of college that I first noticed the warning signs of my spinal condition. Occasional numbness in my legs after long study sessions. Increasing back pain that I attributed to hours hunched over textbooks. When I finally visited the campus doctor, the preliminary examination revealed potential disc issues. Nothing urgent, the doctor had assured me, but something to monitor as you continue your education. I dismissed the warning, too focused on my medical school applications to worry about what seemed like minor discomfort. It would be a decision I would come to regret deeply in the coming years. My acceptance to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine came with both excitement and a familiar disappointment. When I called my parents with the news, my mother's first response was, "That's on the East Coast, isn't it? You'll be so far away." No congratulations, no pride, just concern about the distance. That same week, Vanessa secured a marketing internship with a local sportswear company, prompting my father to take the entire family out for a celebratory dinner. My medical school acceptance wasn't mentioned once during the evening. Daniel, having graduated with his medical technology degree, transferred to a hospital lab position in Baltimore so we could move together. "I believe in us," he told me as we packed our apartment. "And I believe in you." The move across the country was liberating. Distance provided a buffer against the constant reminders of my secondary status in the family hierarchy. Weekly phone calls with my parents became briefer, often ending when Vanessa needed their attention for something urgent. Medical school was everything I had dreamed of and more. I thrived in the challenging environment, quickly distinguishing myself among my peers. During my second year, I was fortunate to catch the attention of Dr. Eleanor Winston, a pioneering neurosurgeon known for her groundbreaking work in spinal procedures. She took me under her wing, providing mentorship that filled the parental guidance void I'd experienced my entire life. "You have exceptional hands and intuition," Dr. Winston told me after observing my first assist in the OR. "But more importantly, you have compassion. That combination is rare and valuable." As my medical education progressed, however, my physical condition deteriorated. The occasional numbness in my legs became more frequent. The back pain intensified until it required daily pain medication to function. By the time I entered my residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital, I was concealing a significant health issue from everyone except Daniel and Dr. Winston. An MRI during my 3rd month of residency revealed the truth I had been avoiding: severe disc herniation that required immediate surgical intervention. Without surgery, I risked permanent nerve damage and potentially the end of my surgical career before it had truly begun. "We need to schedule this immediately," Dr. Winston advised, reviewing my scans with concern. "I'll perform the procedure myself, but Rebecca, you'll need support during recovery. This isn't something you can manage alone, especially if you want to return to the residency program quickly." I scheduled the surgery for the following month, during a brief break in my rotation schedule. Despite our strained relationship, I expected my family to support me during this critical procedure. The surgery carried risks: infection, nerve damage, complications from anesthesia. And I found myself craving the comfort of parental presence despite years of disappointment. 1 month before the scheduled surgery, I called home to explain the situation. My mother answered, and I carefully detailed the procedure, the risks involved, and the expected 6-week recovery period. "Oh, Rebecca," my mother sighed after I finished speaking. "That's the same weekend as Vanessa's college graduation." My stomach dropped. "Mom, this is major surgery. I'll be in the hospital for at least 5 days, and I'll need help after discharge." "Well, we've already booked flights and the rental house for the graduation weekend," she replied, her voice tight with annoyance. "Vanessa has worked so hard for this moment." I gripped the phone tighter. "And I haven't?" "Mom, I could have permanent nerve damage if this doesn't go well. I'm asking for your support for once." My father got on the line then, his tone already defensive. "Rebecca, be reasonable. Your sister's graduation is a once-in-a-lifetime event. You're having a routine procedure that doctors perform every day." "It's not routine to me," I said, my voice rising with disbelief. "I'm the one being cut open." "Your sister's graduation is more important than your surgery," my mother interjected firmly. "She needs us there. You're always so independent anyway." Something inside me snapped. Years of accumulated resentment bubbled to the surface. When have you ever chosen me? When have my achievements or needs ever come first? I'm having major surgery, and you're telling me that watching Vanessa walk across a stage for 10 seconds is more important. "Don't be dramatic," my father dismissed. "You're a doctor now. You understand how these things work." "I understand perfectly," I replied, my voice cold. "I understand that I've never been a priority in this family, and I never will be." I hung up the phone and collapsed to the floor in tears. That's where Daniel found me an hour later, curled into a ball, finally facing the truth about my place in my family's hearts. The day before my surgery, I received a final call from my parents. They were in California for Vanessa's graduation, staying in a beachfront rental house they had splurged on for the occasion. "We're just checking in before your procedure tomorrow," my mother said, the sounds of a celebration evident in the background. "Vanessa wants to say good luck too." My sister came on the line briefly, her voice slightly slurred from what I assumed was champagne. "Hey, Becca, good luck with your back thing. I'll try to call you after, but we've got parties all weekend, so don't worry if you don't hear from me." I thanked her politely and ended the call, a strange numbness replacing the hurt I'd felt earlier. Daniel squeezed my hand as I put down the phone. "I'll be there every step of the way," he promised. "You're not alone." The morning of the surgery, Dr. Winston noticed the absence of family in my pre-op room. "Just Daniel today?" she asked gently. "My family had a conflict," I replied, the lie easier than explaining the truth. Dr. Winston's expression told me she understood more than I was saying. "Well, you have family here too," she said firmly. "Your hospital family." The nurse assigned to my case, Olivia, went above and beyond during my recovery, checking on me during her breaks and bringing small comforts from home, a softer pillow, herbal tea, audiobooks to pass the time when the pain kept me awake. What should have been a 5-day hospital stay extended to 8 when I developed a post-surgical infection. The pain was excruciating, the antibiotics made me violently ill, and the fear of permanent damage was constant. Through it all, my phone remained silent. No calls from my parents, no texts from Vanessa. Daniel fielded concerned messages from friends and colleagues, but nothing from my family for 3 full days after the surgery. On the 4th day, when I was fighting through the worst of the infection, a generic bouquet arrived with a card that read, "Get well soon. Love, Mom, Dad, and Vanessa." No personal message, no phone call to accompany it, just flowers that could have been sent to any acquaintance in the hospital. That night, alone in my hospital room while Daniel had gone home to shower and change, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I would no longer expect or seek validation from people unwilling to give it. I would build my life around those who showed up, not those who shared my blood. The realization was both liberating and profoundly sad, a mourning for the family relationship I had always craved but now accepted I would never have. The physical recovery from spinal surgery was grueling. For the first 2 weeks, I could barely move without assistance. Daniel moved into my apartment, taking a leave of absence from work to help with everything from bathing to meal preparation. Each small victory, sitting up without pain, walking to the bathroom unassisted, managing a full night's sleep, was celebrated between us as the significant milestone it was. My physical therapist, Marcus, became another pillar of support during those difficult months. Twice-weekly sessions gradually rebuilt my strength and mobility. "Your determination is impressive," he commented during a particularly challenging session. "Most patients with your type of surgery take much longer to reach these benchmarks." "I have a residency to return to," I explained, pushing through another set of exercises despite the burning pain. Marcus smiled knowingly. "It's more than that. You've got something to prove." He wasn't wrong. Every painful step forward was fueled not just by professional ambition, but by a deep desire to prove my worth, to myself, if to no one else. Communication with my family became increasingly strained during my recovery. My mother sent flowers with a generic card. My father called once, spending most of the conversation talking about Vanessa's job interviews at marketing firms. "She's had 3 offers already," he boasted. "Everyone's so impressed with her portfolio." "That's great," I replied flatly, too exhausted from physical therapy to manufacture enthusiasm. "How's your back thing coming along?" he asked as an afterthought. "My spinal surgery recovery is progressing," I corrected him. "I should be able to return to limited duty in another month." "Oh, good," he replied absently. "Listen, your mother wants to know if you're coming home for Thanksgiving. Vanessa's bringing a new boyfriend she wants everyone to meet." I closed my eyes, letting the familiar disappointment wash over me. "I don't think I'll be cleared for travel by then." "That's too bad," my father said, relief evident in his voice. "Maybe Christmas then." Meanwhile, Vanessa's social media was filled with posts about graduation celebrations, beach trips with friends, and interviews at amazing companies with incredible cultures. Not once did she mention my surgery or recovery. In one particularly tone-deaf post, she complained about a minor ankle sprain from a hike, worst pain ever. "Can barely walk." Loudly crying face. After another call where my mother spent 20 minutes detailing Vanessa's new apartment before asking perfunctorily about my health, I made the decision to limit contact. I stopped initiating calls, responded to texts with brief, factual updates, and declined the Christmas invitation citing work obligations rather than ongoing recovery needs. The distance created space for healing, not just physical, but emotional. 3 months after surgery, I returned to my surgical residency with a renewed focus and perspective. The experience of being a patient had transformed my approach to medicine. I understood now the fear, vulnerability, and isolation that patients felt, particularly those without support systems. Dr. Eleanor continued to take special interest in my development, inviting me to assist on complex cases and guiding my specialization towards spinal surgeries. "Your personal experience gives you insight that can't be taught in medical school," she observed after watching me counsel a frightened preoperative patient. "You speak their language now." The hospital director, Dr. Lawrence Mitchell, noticed my performance as well. "Winston speaks highly of you," he mentioned during a department meeting. "Says you have the potential to be exceptional." I channeled my emotional energy into building a new support system. Weekly dinners with fellow residents Jordan and Melissa became a highlight, the 3 of us sharing the unique stresses and triumphs of surgical training. Daniel remained my rock, his steady presence a constant reminder that genuine support existed. On the 1-year anniversary of my surgery, Daniel proposed during a quiet dinner at home. "You're the strongest person I know," he said, presenting a simple solitaire ring. "And I want to spend my life with you." Dr. Eleanor became more than a mentor. She became the mother figure I had longed for. She celebrated my successes without qualification, offered guidance without comparison, and provided the unconditional support I had never experienced from my biological mother. 6 months into my recovery, I began therapy with Dr. Sarah Coleman, a psychologist specializing in family trauma. Our weekly sessions became a safe space to process years of emotional neglect and the acute betrayal of my parents' absence during my medical crisis. What you're describing is a classic golden child/scapegoat dynamic, Dr. Coleman explained during one session. Your parents created a family system where Vanessa's needs were automatically prioritized, regardless of circumstance. But why? I asked, the question that had haunted me since childhood. What made her more deserving of their attention? It's rarely about deserving, Dr. Coleman replied gently. These patterns often develop for reasons unrelated to the children themselves. Perhaps Vanessa's personality mirrored traits they valued, or perhaps her needs were simply louder and more visible than yours. Through therapy, I developed tools for establishing healthy boundaries, techniques for self-validation, and methods for processing anger constructively rather than letting it consume me. Family contact became minimal and superficial. Holiday phone calls were brief and focused on safe topics. I declined invitations to family gatherings, choosing instead to celebrate with Daniel and my chosen family of friends and colleagues. Gradually, my parents seemed to realize that the dynamics had permanently changed. My mother's voice took on a confused, sometimes hurt tone during our infrequent conversations. My father became uncharacteristically solicitous, asking about my work with awkward interest. Vanessa occasionally texted, usually when she needed medical advice or wanted to complain about our parents. "Why are you being so difficult about visiting?" she asked once. "Mom says you're always too busy for family now." I didn't bother explaining. The gulf between our experiences felt too vast to bridge through text messages, and I no longer had the energy to make her understand what she had never bothered to see. As my physical strength returned, so did my professional confidence. The surgeon who had almost been derailed by injury was now stronger, more determined, and possessing a depth of empathy that distinguished me among my peers. The pain had transformed me, burning away the need for external validation and leaving behind a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The years following my surgery witnessed a steep trajectory in my career. I completed my surgical residency with evaluations that placed me in the top percentile of graduates. My focus on spinal procedures, informed by my personal experience, led to the development of a minimally invasive technique that reduced recovery time by nearly 30%. By my second year post-residency, I had published research in 3 major medical journals and was receiving invitations to speak at conferences across the country. Job offers arrived from prestigious hospitals in Boston, Chicago, and San Francisco, each promising state-of-the-art facilities and considerable autonomy. Despite the tempting offers, I chose to stay at Johns Hopkins where Dr. Eleanor practiced. "They can offer you more money elsewhere," she acknowledged when I consulted her about my decision, "but here, you have the freedom to build something meaningful." She was right. The familiarity of the hospital, the relationships I'd cultivated, and the opportunity to continue learning from my mentor outweighed the financial incentives elsewhere. Daniel and I married in a small ceremony in the Baltimore Botanical Gardens 4 years after my surgery. Dr. Eleanor gave a speech normally reserved for the mother of the bride, her voice catching as she described watching me grow from promising student to exceptional surgeon and cherished friend. My parents attended the wedding, looking uncomfortable among the guests they didn't recognize: colleagues, fellow surgeons, friends who had become family over the years. Vanessa brought her boyfriend Travis, who drank too much champagne and made inappropriate comments during the reception, eventually being asked to leave by Daniel's brother. "Your friends are so serious," my mother commented during the reception, gesturing toward a group of neurosurgeons engaged in animated conversation. "Don't they know how to have fun at a wedding? They're discussing a groundbreaking procedure that saved a child's life last week," I replied evenly. I find that more interesting than small talk. My mother's lips tightened, but she said nothing more. My professional advancement continued at a pace that surprised even me. By 32, I became the youngest attending surgeon in the neurosurgery department. My reputation for taking difficult cases that other surgeons declined made me both respected and sought after. Drawing from my own experience as a patient, I created a support program for spinal surgery recovery, pairing current patients with former ones who could provide practical advice and emotional support. The program reduced readmission rates and improved patient satisfaction scores dramatically. I began mentoring new residents with an emphasis on compassionate care alongside technical excellence. The scalpel is just a tool, I would tell them. Your humanity is what makes you a healer. Each year, I was invited to present at the International Spinal Surgery Conference, my sessions consistently among the most highly attended. Videos of my innovative techniques were used in teaching hospitals across the country. As my professional stature grew, a curious shift occurred in my family dynamics. My parents began to recognize, or at least acknowledge, my success in ways they never had before. Rebecca's drive and determination always set her apart, my mother told her friends at a community fundraiser I attended during a rare visit home. We always knew she was destined for great things. I nearly choked on my drink hearing her revisionist history, but said nothing. The approval I had desperately craved in my youth now felt hollow and unearned. My father developed a newfound interest in explaining medical procedures to his golf buddies. My daughter pioneered that technique, he would say, according to family friends who reported these conversations back to me with amusement. Meanwhile, Vanessa's career followed a less certain path. She hopped between marketing positions, never staying at one company longer than 18 months. Her relationship with Travis ended after 3 years, a messy breakup that involved shared property and mutual accusations. During our infrequent conversations, Vanessa increasingly expressed dissatisfaction with her professional life. I just feel like I haven't found my calling yet, she confessed during one phone call. Everything feels so meaningless. For the first time, she began asking questions about healthcare careers. What kind of jobs are there in hospitals that don't require medical degrees? She inquired during a holiday call. I'm thinking of making a change. 5 years after my surgery, I attended a holiday gathering at my parents' home, my first in several years. The tension was palpable beneath the festive decorations and carefully prepared meal. During dinner, my mother raised her glass in a toast. To both my successful daughters, she said, smiling broadly. Catherine the marketing whiz and Rebecca the surgeon. Your father and I are so proud. Something in her blatant attempt to equate our vastly different paths and to present herself as an equally supportive parent to both triggered a response I couldn't suppress. It's interesting to hear you say that, I said calmly, setting down my glass. Considering you told me that Vanessa's college graduation was more important than being with me during life-altering surgery. The table fell silent. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Vanessa looked confused. That was a difficult situation, my mother finally said, her voice tight. We had commitments we couldn't break. You had 2 commitments, I corrected her. And you chose one over the other, as you always had. I just want to be clear about our history before we toast to it. That evening marked the first honest conversation about the family patterns that had shaped my childhood and young adulthood. It was uncomfortable and left many issues unresolved, but it placed the reality of our relationships squarely on the table for the first time. No longer was I willing to participate in the fiction that we were a close-knit family temporarily separated by my demanding career. The truth that I had been systematically deprioritized throughout my life was finally acknowledged, even if not fully accepted by my parents. As difficult as that conversation was, it marked a turning point. Not toward reconciliation exactly, but toward authenticity. We would never be the Hallmark card version of family, but perhaps we could be honest about who we really were to each other. 8 years after my surgery, an unexpected opportunity arose that would once again reshape my professional and personal landscape. Dr. Eleanor announced her retirement, sending shockwaves through the neurosurgery department where she had been a fixture for over 2 decades. "I've given my best years to this hospital," she told me over dinner at her home, where we had taken to meeting monthly for professional mentorship that had evolved into deep friendship. "Now I want to give my remaining good years to myself." What she said next stunned me even more than her retirement announcement. "I've recommended you as my successor for chief of surgery," she stated, watching my reaction carefully. "The board is considering you and Thompson." Dr. Thompson was 15 years my senior, with an impressive record of his own. The idea that I would be considered alongside him for such a prestigious position seemed almost absurd. "I'm too young," I protested. "I've only been in attending for 6 years. And in those 6 years, you've published more research, developed more innovative techniques, and saved more impossible cases than Thompson has in 15, Eleanor countered. "Age is just a number. Talent and vision are what matter." The interview process was rigorous. The hospital board subjected both candidates to extensive questioning about management philosophy, department vision, and technical expertise. Dr. Thompson emphasized his years of experience and established relationships with hospital administration. I focused instead on innovation, my plans for integrating new technologies, improving patient outcomes through enhanced recovery protocols, and expanding research opportunities for promising residents. The board deliberated for 2 weeks. Dr. Lawrence, who had watched my career develop since residency, later told me that the final vote had been close until he presented my patient outcome statistics compared to national averages. "The numbers spoke for themselves," he said. "Your patients recover faster, experience fewer complications, and report higher satisfaction. That's the kind of leadership we need." At 35, I became the youngest chief of surgery in the hospital's history. The announcement prompted a feature in the Journal of American Medicine titled, "The Rising Star of Neurosurgery," highlighting my rapid ascent and innovative approaches. As chief, I implemented new department protocols based directly on patient experience, required all surgeons to follow up personally with patients within 48 hours of procedures, and established a mentorship program pairing experienced surgeons with promising medical students from underrepresented backgrounds. Daniel's pride and support never wavered. Dr. Rebecca Mitchell, chief of surgery, he would say, testing the sound of my new title with a grin. "Has a nice ring to it." 3 months into my new position, Dr. Eleanor hosted a celebration dinner at her home. The intimate gathering included only Daniel, myself, and our host, who presented me with a velvet box after dessert. Inside was a set of surgical instruments, their handles inlaid with mother-of-pearl. "These were given to me by my mentor when I became chief," Eleanor explained, her eyes misty. "They've performed hundreds of life-saving procedures. Now they're yours." Later that evening, sitting in Eleanor's garden with coffee, we had a conversation that crystallized the journey I had been on since that fateful surgery 9 years earlier. "You know," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "sometimes the people who should support us don't or can't. And sometimes the universe compensates by sending us exactly who we need instead." I thought about how she had stepped into the void my parents had left, providing guidance, support, and unconditional belief in my abilities. "I think I'm finally at peace with it," I admitted. "I've stopped waiting for them to become the parents I needed." "That's the final stage of healing," she nodded. "When you no longer need the wound to close differently than it did." The conversation shifted to my plans for expanding the department and creating new research opportunities. For the first time in my life, I felt professionally fulfilled and personally healed. The constant ache of familial rejection had faded to a dull memory, overtaken by the rich relationships I had cultivated and the meaningful work I performed daily. 3 months into my position as chief, I received an unusual call from my mother. The timing was odd, mid-afternoon on a Tuesday, and her nervous tone immediately put me on alert. After several minutes of uncharacteristic small talk about the weather and her garden club, she finally arrived at the purpose of her call. Your sister has some exciting news, she began hesitantly. Oh, I responded, only half listening as I reviewed surgical schedules on my computer. Vanessa has completed a certification program in healthcare administration, my mother continued. She's applied for a position at several hospitals in the Baltimore area. My fingers froze over the keyboard. Baltimore? Yes, my mother confirmed. And one of them is Johns Hopkins. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? It wasn't a coincidence, of course. Vanessa had specifically targeted my hospital, though whether from genuine interest in the institution or a desire to capitalize on my position there, I couldn't be sure. She's very qualified, my mother added quickly. The program was quite selective. Then came the inevitable request. I was hoping you might put in a good word for her, just to make sure her application gets proper consideration. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the familiar pressure to prioritize Vanessa's needs. Mom, I can't do that, I explained firmly. It would be unethical for me to influence the hiring process, especially for a family member. I'll have to recuse myself from any decisions regarding Vanessa's application. My mother's disappointment was palpable even through the phone. But you're the chief now. Surely you have some say in who gets hired. That's exactly why I can't get involved, I replied. My position requires me to maintain ethical boundaries. Vanessa's application will be evaluated on its merits, just like everyone else's. After hanging up, I sat in my office contemplating the potential complications of having Vanessa working in my hospital. The professional boundaries would be challenging enough, but the personal history between us created an additional layer of complexity. That evening, I discussed the situation with Daniel over dinner. How do you feel about potentially seeing her every day? He asked, concern evident in his expression. Honestly, I'm not sure, I admitted. Part of me has moved beyond the hurt, but another part worries about old patterns resurfacing. You're not the same person you were 9 years ago, Daniel reminded me gently. You've built boundaries and a support system. Those won't disappear just because Vanessa is in the building. The following week, I scheduled a session with Dr. Coleman to process my feelings about the situation. Your reaction is perfectly normal, she assured me. Family relationships carry powerful emotional charges, even when we've done extensive healing work. We discussed strategies for maintaining professional relationships while protecting my emotional well-being. The key is to separate her professional performance from your personal history, Dr. Coleman advised. Judge her work on its own merits and keep personal interactions limited and clearly bounded. I also had a frank conversation with Dr. Lawrence about the family situation, wanting to be transparent about potential conflicts of interest. I appreciate your disclosure, he said. I'll ensure that HR handles her application appropriately, without your involvement. 2 weeks later, I received an email notification that Vanessa had indeed been hired as part of the administrative staff based solely on her qualifications and interview performance. The email also indicated that as chief of surgery, I would be giving the welcoming address at the orientation for all new administrative staff the following Monday. The weekend before orientation, I cycled through anxiety, resignation, and finally a tentative acceptance. Whatever happened, I had built a life and career I was proud of. Vanessa's presence couldn't diminish that achievement, regardless of our complicated history. Orientation morning dawned clear and bright. I rose at 5 for my usual pre-work run, hoping the physical exertion would clear my mind and settle my nerves. The familiar rhythm of feet hitting pavement had always been meditative for me, a space to process complex emotions before facing the day's challenges. Back home, I reviewed the day's surgeries and meetings while sipping coffee. 2 spinal fusions, a tumor resection, department budget review, and now the orientation address. A full day, but manageable. I took extra care with my appearance, selecting a tailored charcoal suit and the pearl earrings Daniel had given me on our anniversary. My reflection in the mirror showed a confident professional, chief of surgery Dr. Rebecca Mitchell, rather than the wounded daughter or overlooked sister I had once been. Daniel kissed me goodbye at the door, his hands resting reassuringly on my shoulders. "Remember who you are now," he said simply. The 4 words encompassed everything. My journey, my growth, my hard-won peace. The orientation was scheduled for 8 in the hospital's main conference room. I arrived early, reviewing my notes as the room gradually filled with new employees. From my position near the podium, I scanned the crowd, immediately spotting Vanessa in the front row. At 34, she looked much the same as always, pretty in a conventional way, her blonde hair now cut in a professional bob, her expression a mix of excitement and nervousness. She hadn't noticed me yet, too busy chatting animatedly with the woman beside her. Dr. Lawrence opened the session, welcoming the new staff members and introducing the hospital's leadership team. And now, he announced, "I'm pleased to introduce our Chief of Surgery, Dr. Rebecca Mitchell, who will share more about our surgical department's mission and achievements." As I approached the podium, Vanessa's head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock as she registered my presence and title. Our gazes locked for a moment, hers confused and startled, mine professionally neutral despite the emotional turbulence beneath. I began my prepared remarks, providing an overview of the surgical department's structure, our recent advancements in minimally invasive techniques, and our commitment to patient-centered care. At Johns Hopkins, I stated, my voice momentarily wavering before I steadied it, we believe that technical excellence must be paired with compassion. Our patients entrust us with their lives during their most vulnerable moments. That trust is sacred, and we honor it by providing not just treatment, but healing. As I spoke, I noticed Vanessa's expression shifting from shock to something that looked almost like pride. She sat straighter, her eyes never leaving my face as I detailed the department's achievements and future goals. Excellence is our standard, I concluded. Accountability is our practice. And innovation is our commitment to patients who deserve nothing less than our absolute best. Welcome to Johns Hopkins, where your work will contribute directly to saving lives and advancing medicine. I stepped away from the podium with my head held high, nodding politely to the assembled staff as they applauded. Around the room, I could see people leaning toward each other, whispering as they glanced between Vanessa and me, the family resemblance obvious now that we were in the same space. I slipped out of the conference room as Dr. Lawrence introduced the next speaker, retreating to my office to collect myself before my first surgery of the day. I canceled a morning meeting, needing the time to process the emotional impact of seeing Vanessa in my professional domain. Daniel texted, "How did it go?" "As well as could be expected," I replied. She was surprised. As I was reviewing surgical notes, my office phone rang. It was Dr. Eleanor, somehow sensing that today would be challenging. "I had a feeling you might need to talk," she said when I answered. "Your sister's first day? How did you know?" I asked, though Eleanor's intuition had long since ceased to surprise me. "Hospital grapevine," she chuckled, already buzzing about the chief of surgery and her administrator sister. "Are you all right?" "I'm processing," I admitted. It was strange seeing her there, in my space. "Remember, it's not your space or her space," Eleanor advised gently. "It's just space. You've both earned the right to occupy it." Our conversation was interrupted by a knock on my office door. I said goodbye to Eleanor and called, "Come in." Vanessa entered hesitantly, looking both professional in her new role and strangely childlike in her uncertainty. "Rebecca," she began, then corrected herself. "Dr. Mitchell, do you have a moment?" Briefly, I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "I have surgery in 45 minutes. She sat down, fidgeting with the lanyard holding her new ID badge. "I had no idea you were chief of surgery," she said finally. "Why didn't you tell me when I mentioned applying here? Would it have changed your decision?" I asked neutrally. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe. It's just surprising." "There's a lot you don't know about me," I observed, keeping my tone even. The tension between us built as years of unspoken feelings simmered beneath the surface of our careful conversation. "You always act like I did something wrong," Vanessa said defensively. "Even now, sitting in your fancy office with your important title, you're looking at me like I'm the villain in your story." It was the same deflection she had always employed, turning my legitimate feelings into an attack on her. In the past, I might have backed down, apologized, made myself smaller to accommodate her discomfort. But I was no longer that person. 9 years ago, I said quietly I had major spinal surgery that could have ended my career or left me with permanent nerve damage. Mom and Dad chose to attend your graduation instead of being with me in the hospital. You called me once, drunk from a celebration party, to wish me good luck with your back thing. I spent 8 days in the hospital fighting a post-surgical infection, alone except for Daniel and the hospital staff. That happened, Vanessa. It's not a story I made up to make you feel bad. Before she could respond, my pager sounded urgently. Emergency consultation needed in the ER. "I have to go," I said, standing and gathering my white coat. "We'll have to continue this another time." I spent the next 5 hours in surgery, removing bone fragments pressing against a young man's spinal cord after a motorcycle accident. The focus required pushed everything else from my mind: family drama, old wounds, present tensions. There was only the patient, the procedure, and the precision needed to preserve function and prevent paralysis. When I emerged from the OR, physically exhausted but mentally clearer, I found a text from Vanessa. "Can we talk after your shift?" "I'll wait in the cafeteria." I found her there at 7 that evening, nursing a cup of coffee and staring out the window at the darkening sky. She looked up as I approached, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "I've been sitting here thinking about what you said," she began without preamble. "About your surgery. I never knew it was that serious." I sat down across from her, too tired to maintain professional distance. "What did you think it was?" "I don't know," she admitted. The way Mom and Dad talked about it, it sounded like a minor procedure. Mom called it an outpatient thing you were having done. I stared at her in disbelief. I had major spinal surgery to prevent permanent nerve damage. I was hospitalized for over a week. I couldn't walk without assistance for nearly a month afterward. Vanessa's face paled. "They never told me that." "I swear, Rebecca. All they said was you were having a minor procedure and that you understood why they needed to be at my graduation." For the first time, I considered the possibility that Vanessa hadn't been complicit in my parents' dismissal of my needs, that perhaps she, too, had been fed a narrative that absolved them of their choices. "What else didn't they tell you?" I asked slowly. We talked for nearly 2 hours, comparing our vastly different understandings of shared family history. While I remembered being consistently deprioritized, Vanessa recalled a family that celebrated both daughters equally. Where I saw pattern, she saw isolated incidents. Where I felt systematic dismissal, she perceived normal family dynamics. "I never saw it," she said finally, her voice small. "I never realized what it was like for you." Our conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing, my mother calling, as if summoned by our discussion of her. "Do you mind if I take this?" I asked Vanessa. "Actually, I'd like you to hear something." I answered the call and immediately put it on speaker, placing the phone on the table between us. "Rebecca," finally, my mother said without greeting. "I've been trying to reach you all day. Did Vanessa find you? How is her first day going?" "Hello to you too, Mom," I replied evenly. "Yes, Vanessa and I have connected." "Wonderful. I knew having you both at the same hospital would bring you closer." "You've always been so distant, Rebecca." "This is exactly what your relationship needs." Vanessa's eyes widened at our mother's characterization, her gaze meeting mine across the table. "Mom," I said carefully, "I'm actually in the middle of something important. Can I call you back tomorrow?" "Oh, always too busy," my mother sighed dramatically. "Well, just make sure you look out for your sister there. She's new to the medical world, you know. Not everyone can be a doctor like you." I ended the call after a brief goodbye, watching Vanessa's face as she processed what she had just heard. "Has she always talked to you like that?" she asked quietly. "Pretty much," I confirmed. "That was actually relatively mild." Vanessa was silent for a long moment, then said, "I think I'm seeing something I've been blind to my whole life." It was the first moment of true sister solidarity we had experienced in adulthood, a shared recognition of a family dynamic that had shaped both of us in different ways. "I want you to know," Vanessa said as we prepared to leave, "that I never intended to intrude on your territory here. I applied to Johns Hopkins because it's the best hospital in the area, not because I was trying to insert myself into your life." "I believe you," I said, and was surprised to find that I meant it. "Can we try again?" she asked hesitantly. Not as chief and administrator, but as sisters who maybe never really knew each other. We agreed to maintain a strictly professional relationship at the hospital while working on our personal connection outside of work. It wouldn't be easy. Years of misunderstanding and resentment couldn't be erased in a single conversation, but for the first time, I saw a glimmer of possibility where before there had been only pain. "I never saw it before," Vanessa said as we parted in the parking garage, "but I see it now. And I'm sorry." Her apology, simple and sincere, was something I had never expected to receive. It didn't erase the past, but it opened a door to a different future, one where my experience was acknowledged rather than dismissed, where healing might eventually be possible. The first month of working in the same hospital with Vanessa required careful navigation of professional and personal boundaries. We established clear guidelines. At work, she would report directly to the HR director, not to me. We would use professional titles in public settings and first names in private. And we would maintain appropriate separation between our departmental responsibilities. Staff curiosity about our relationship was inevitable. Whispers followed us in hallways, conversations paused when we entered rooms together, and questions about our family connection arose in seemingly casual conversations. Rather than addressing the gossip directly, we chose to model professional behavior. In meetings where we both attended, we demonstrated respectful, collegial interaction without personal familiarity. Gradually, the novelty of our connection faded, replaced by acceptance of our separate professional identities. From a distance, I began to mentor Vanessa on hospital culture and healthcare administration norms, recommending resources and introducing her to colleagues who could provide guidance in her new role. During her first departmental meeting where I presided as chief, I watched Vanessa observing me with new eyes. As I led discussions on surgical protocols, research initiatives, and patient outcome metrics, I could see her registering the respect my colleagues accorded me, the authority with which I spoke, the depth of knowledge I commanded. Afterward, she sent a text that simply read, "I'm really proud of you." I don't think I ever said that before, but I should have. To my surprise, Vanessa proved exceptionally skilled in her administrative role. Her marketing background translated well to healthcare communication, and her organizational abilities streamlined several cumbersome administrative processes. During a quarterly review meeting, I publicly acknowledged her contributions to improving departmental efficiency. The new intake protocol developed by Administrator Shaw has reduced paperwork redundancy by 30%, I noted, using her professional name. This represents a significant improvement in both staff efficiency and patient experience. The brief nod she gave me contained more genuine connection than we had shared in years of family gatherings. 6 weeks after Vanessa started at Hopkins, our parents made an unannounced visit to the hospital. They appeared at my office door just as I was preparing to scrub in for an afternoon procedure. "Mom, Dad," I said, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "We wanted to see both our girls in their natural habitat," my father explained with forced joviality. "Vanessa said you're some big shot around here now." My assistant Margaret's eyes widened slightly at my father's dismissive characterization of my position. "Dr. Mitchell is preparing for surgery in 20 minutes, she informed them politely but firmly. Perhaps you could schedule a visit for another time? Nonsense, my mother interjected. She has time for her parents. Don't you, Rebecca? The old pattern beckoned. Accommodate, apologize, adjust my needs to meet their expectations. But I was no longer that person. I have a patient waiting, I said evenly. I can meet you for lunch at 1 in my office if that works for you. Margaret can show you to the cafeteria until then. My mother's lips tightened, but before she could respond, a resident appeared with preoperative scans I needed to review. Chief, the patient's asking some questions about the approach you're planning to use, he said, then noticed my parents. I'm sorry to interrupt. Not at all, Dr. Kim, I replied. My parents were just leaving for the cafeteria. Please bring those scans into my office. The contrast between how my colleagues addressed me and how my parents diminished my position was not lost on anyone in the room. At lunch, Vanessa joined us in my office, the four of us sharing a meal together for the first time in years. My mother looked distinctly uncomfortable in the space dominated by my medical degrees, awards, and professional photographs. So you're really in charge of all the surgeons? My father asked, glancing around at the evidence of my authority. Rebecca oversees the entire surgical department, Vanessa answered before I could. She's the youngest chief of surgery in Hopkins history. The pride in her voice was unmistakable and startling in its sincerity. Well, my mother said after an awkward pause, we always knew you'd do well. You were always so determined. Yes, I agreed calmly. I was determined. I am determined. But determination alone doesn't make a chief of surgery. Skill does. Knowledge does. Leadership does. What your daughter is too modest to tell you, came Dr. Eleanor's voice from the doorway where she stood holding a file I had requested, is that she's also pioneered 2 surgical techniques that have become standard practice across the country. She's not just an administrator, she's a genuinely gifted surgeon. Eleanor had stopped by unannounced, as she often did since her retirement, but her timing couldn't have been better. And you are? My mother asked with barely concealed irritation at the interruption. Dr. Eleanor Winston, she replied with a warm smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rebecca's mentor and predecessor. And you must be the parents who couldn't attend her spinal surgery. I've heard so much about you. The silence that followed was deafening. That evening, after my parents had left and my final rounds were complete, Vanessa and I sat in my office sharing a pot of tea. They've always been like that, haven't they? She asked quietly. Always minimizing your achievements. Yes, I confirmed. Always. I don't think I ever noticed, because they built me up so much, she admitted. But now I can see it clearly. It was the beginning of an honest conversation, the first of many, about the family dynamics that had shaped both of us. There were no easy answers, no immediate resolutions, but the simple acknowledgement of reality felt like a victory after years of gaslighting and dismissal. Over the following months, we established a new pattern of family interaction. Monthly dinners included Daniel, whose steady presence helped buffer lingering tensions. My parents made visible, if sometimes awkward, efforts to acknowledge my professional achievements without immediately pivoting to Vanessa's activities. Vanessa herself underwent perhaps the most significant transformation, actively working to understand my experiences rather than defensively dismissing them. She began to intervene when our parents fell into old patterns, gently redirecting conversations or highlighting my contributions when they were overlooked. I maintained clear boundaries while allowing measured reconnection. The emotional distance I had established was not punishment, but protection, and I made no apologies for continuing to prioritize my well-being over family harmony. The first holiday gathering after Vanessa joined the hospital felt different from any that had come before. The attention was more balanced, the conversations more equitable. It wasn't perfect. Decades of entrenched patterns don't disappear overnight, but it was movement in a direction I had long ago stopped hoping for. 1 year after our unexpected reunion at orientation, I was scheduled to perform a complex spinal reconstruction similar to the procedure I had undergone 9 years earlier. As part of her administrative training rotation, Vanessa was observing from the gallery along with other non-medical staff learning about surgical procedures. In an unprecedented move, I had invited my parents to observe as well, arranging for them to sit with Dr. Eleanor, who could explain the technical aspects of the surgery. Through the observation window, I could see my mother's face as she watched me lead the surgical team through the intricate procedure, her expression transitioning from polite interest to genuine awe as she realized the complexity and precision of my work. The surgery was successful, the patient's prognosis excellent. As I exited the OR, my father approached me, his expression uncharacteristically humbled. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. "I had no idea. We should have been there. For your surgery. We should have been there." It wasn't a full apology, but it was an acknowledgement, the first step toward genuine accountability. That evening, we gathered for dinner at Daniel's and my home. Vanessa offered a toast, her glass raised toward me. "To Rebecca," she said, "whose journey I'm only beginning to understand, and whose strength I've always admired, even when I didn't show it. You didn't just become a surgeon, you became a healer, a leader, and the kind of sister I hope to deserve someday." My parents added their awkward, but sincere recognition of past mistakes. My mother's eyes glistened as she finally said the words I had never expected to hear. "We're sorry we weren't there when you needed us most." Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, his silent support as constant as ever. Later that week, I placed a new photograph on my office desk, the four of us at dinner, with Daniel and Dr. Eleanor bookending the family group. It wasn't a perfect image of reconciliation, but it was an honest representation of the work in progress. The journey from wounded child to confident leader had been neither straight nor simple. I had built my success despite rather than because of my family. I had found the capacity for measured forgiveness without forgetting the lessons of the past. I had created my own validation when external approval was withheld. Most importantly, I had become the person I needed when I was younger, someone who stood firm in her worth, who created boundaries without apology, who extended compassion without sacrificing self-respect. As I prepared for another day as chief of surgery, I glanced at the photograph, struck by the realization that healing, like surgery, is not a destination but a process. The incision must sometimes break before the body can become whole again. The scar remains as evidence of both damage and repair. 9 years after being told that my sister's graduation was more important than my surgery, I had found peace not in the approval I had once desperately sought, but in the knowledge that I no longer needed it to be whole. What about you? Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? How did you navigate that difficult balance between forgiveness and self-protection? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more healing than the family we were born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey of healing and growth.